Hello everyone, welcome to the Making the Most of Your SpectorSoft Investment webinar. My name is Nick Cavalancia. I'm the VP of Marketing and Product Marketing here at SpectorSoft. And what I want to do is I want to take the next about 60 minutes and kind of talk to you a little bit about the solutions you already have today and the things that you can do in order to get the most out of those solutions. As well as tell you a little bit about some of the other solutions we have in the corporate space to make sure that you have the right solution for your business needs. Now, the agenda that we have today is relatively simple. Looking through that, I'm going to do a quick survey of everyone here just to kind of get a sense of my audience. I always like to do that. And then also talk a little bit about why would we even want to monitor employees and their activities first, what problems are we trying to solve, spotting the problem employees that exist. And then take a look at the SpectorSoft solutions that you have today, cover some tips and tricks so that you can get, again, the most out of what you have. And then just tell you a little bit about Spector 360 as well. And I think it'll be both informative and a bit of a learning exercise for all of us. So why don't I start first off by, I've got a quick poll here that I want to show. And what I'd like you to do, I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. And it's basically how many employees do you have at your place of business. So total number of employees there. You'll see the options. You can go ahead. It's interactive on the screen. Go ahead and click an option for yourself to see whichever one is most appropriate. Looks like you're jumping right in there. Appreciate it. I've got 2/3 of you already jumping in there. That's good. I'll wait another couple of seconds. Appreciate the responses. I just wonder how that's possible. It just went up to like 82% and then dropped down to 78%. It's like as if one of you retracted your vote or something. I don't know exactly how that works. That's kind of interesting. Maybe people are just joining in. But if you're just joining in, be sure to just click in how many employees you have. That gives me a really good sense of my audience. I'll wait another 2 or 3 seconds and we're going to go ahead and move on. I'll also show you the results so you can just see where you sit with the rest of your peers. All right, I'm almost done. I'm going to go ahead and close this in just a second. It looks like I think we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and close that off. And just so you can see here, it looks like a pretty even spread. A large number of you have a very small number of employees, less than 25. That's over half of you, and the other half of you or so are 26 users and above. And the demographics actually fit about where I thought we'd see today. So it's a real nice mix of people here. Let me hide those off. And I got one more set of questions which will help me, and that is how many employees are you actually monitoring or investigating concurrently? So the intent here is just how many are you actually worried about in your office space? Some of you it's just one person that you're worried about as a problem, or maybe there's one machine that you're utilizing as kind of your investigative machine, if you will. So go ahead and answer those as well. Again, it's interactive if you're just joining us. Feel free to go ahead and click those just to see how many people are you actually monitoring at any given point in time. Again, appreciate the responses. We're already up to almost 75%. I'll wait another couple of seconds. Almost done there. Wait for just a couple straggler voters and we'll see here. And I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. All right, just so you can see here, it looks like most of you are trying to investigate a very small number, but that also kind of coincides. Remember, half of the people attending this webinar are 25 or less employees. That was half. So if I look here and I can see that a very large percentage, it looks like 92% of people are 10 or less employees that they're monitoring. That kind of coincides. So, and very few of you are even doing more than, upwards of the 50 number there. So that doesn't too surprising either. That helps me get a sense of the audience here. That's perfect. So, let me jump back over to, let me hide those results so you can look at the slides. There we go. You should be back to seeing my slides now. And if we kind of run through the slides, let's first talk about why monitor employees in the first place. First issue is corporate fraud. The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the ACFE, they put out an occupational fraud and abuse report every year. The one for 2012 came out a couple months back, and they've got some stats here. And these stats may not exactly line specifically with those of you that have very small numbers of employees, the 25 seats or less kind of crowd. But you can see here the typical organization based on, I think they surveyed, it was like 3,200 companies or something, very, very statistically relevant sample size. But the typical organization loses 5% of its revenues to fraud. Now that could be something as simple as someone pulling, bills from a drawer at a cashier drawer kind of a thing, or it could be someone who's actually writing checks to a fraudulent company that is actually themselves, or anything in between, of course. You see the median loss is $140,000, and another stat they had from that same report was 25% of the losses were above $1 million. And then they also noted that occupational fraud is even more significant threats to small business, which I think really applies to the audience here, because you typically have things like, I think if I was to ask you guys from a technical standpoint, does everybody have admin rights in your environment? Most of you would probably either say yes, or you'd go, what are admin rights? In which case the answer is yes. And that's just one example of someone having access to basically all your data if they have admin rights everywhere. I used to, in my previous life, I was a consultant, so I actually dealt with a lot of very small businesses. So there's something kind of near and dear to my heart. So I want you to be aware of the fact that corporate fraud can affect even a small business. The second issue is data theft. Every year, Verizon Business, their business division, puts out a data breach investigations report. And some of the stats here was it involved data theft issues and intellectual property theft issues, and 46% of those issues involved insiders. So it could be just one person inside the company. It could be a mixture of someone inside and outside. There was a recent news article about an ambulance company here in the States where the insider was taking the the Social Security number information from their customers and giving it to someone on the outside who was then committing identity theft of those people. And they, of course, got caught. But that kind of information there is a perfect example of how data theft involves insiders. Then who's involved? The first thing you're going to notice if you're a math person is these numbers don't add up to 100. They're not meant to. There is overlap. I actually picked the top couple of categories of who's involved, and you can see that of all the data theft cases that Verizon Business looked at, 29% of the time it involved finance. Keep in mind, if you look 2 and 3 down from that entry, you see regular employees and executive and upper management. What that's meant there is, let's say, of those that involve finance, 28% of them also involved a regular employee. Could have been a regular employee in finance, or it could have been an executive or a management person in finance. And that's why I said these are overlapping values. They're not supposed to add up to 100. But you see 29% in finance and accounting, 29% in human resources, 6% were executives or upper management, and 28% were just what they considered regular employees. I'm not sure why they were regular employees, but okay. The other thing that was really kind of staggering was the time frames. Now, Verizon chose to talk about time frames in terms of both how long it takes for a breach to occur and how long it took for the data breach to be discovered. And they used seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years as their method of breaking apart. Did it take seconds or did it take hours? That they didn't say how many seconds or how many hours. Just did it take? What kind of increments are we really talking about? So in the case of breaches themselves and data theft, 77% of them were in seconds to hours. So not even a day worth of time. It took literally seconds, maybe minutes, maybe hours, tops, in order to data breach. And you think about how simple it is. All someone needs to do is send a copy of your customer list out via Gmail. How long does that take? I'm going to just throw a number out there. I'm going to say half a minute or less. It doesn't take long for a data breach to occur. The staggering part is, now think about this. So let's say that you've lost data in seconds to hours. It happened today. It could have happened because plenty of seconds and hours in today. The discovery time, half of it took months to years. And of that, by the way, so 31% of that was years, 17% of that was months. But think about that. Almost a full third of discovery takes years, more than one. That's a long, long time. So something that may have happened today in literally 30 seconds, you won't know about for 18 months was the average according to ACFE for their employee fraud cases. I've seen numbers as high as 3 years on the average for specific surveys that have been done. So there's a huge disparity, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess, break between the amount of time it takes to discover the breach and the time when the breach actually happened. So let's look at the next one, employee productivity. Now you might say, Nick, wait a second here. Fraud, they're stealing from the company. Data theft, they're stealing from the company. Employee productivity, what am I really losing here? So Salary.com did a survey in March of this year where they asked employees how much time do they spend during the work week on personal stuff on the internet. And at first glance, you look at this chart that I've got, and you look, Nick, come on, man, 39%. I mean, almost 40% of people are spending less than an hour. 29%, 1 to 2 hours. I mean, come on, it's nothing. It's no big deal. It's an hour. Who cares? Okay, I'll agree with you. The numbers are an hour or 2 hours or whatnot. But the interesting thing is, when you take these numbers, because again, they're percentages that add up to 100, and if you were to take these percentages and apply them to a 100-person fictitious company, and just for kind of full disclosure, so you know how I get the numbers I'm going to show you here in a minute, because the ranges on the left-hand side are indeed ranges, I averaged them out. So for the first entry of less than an hour, I said 39% of people were spending a half an hour. Between 0 and 1, it's a half an hour. For 29%, 1.5 hours, right in the middle of 1 to 2 hours, and so on. So I averaged it out and applied it to those percentages, and it's kind of becomes pretty shocking. For a 100-person company, that equates to 226 hours of work each week that is wasted on being on the internet. So if you have a 100-person company, 226 hours of the, call it, 4,000 hours it's supposed to be spent is being wasted on the internet. That equates to 5.6 weeks of time that you've lost that week. Employee productivity is costing your business money. To take the 5.6 weeks of time and put it in even more quantifiable terms, that's the equivalent of 6 full-time employees' time annually. Now, when we're talking about losing information, people losing actual money through corporate fraud, let's say, in this case, you're losing 6 employees worth of time. I don't think there's a business on the planet that can withstand paying 6 people to come to work and do nothing for a year. You can't do it. And so this becomes another reason why you'd want to monitor your employees' activity. I noticed that a lot of you are monitoring 1 to 2 or 3 to 10 employees. Now that may be also a function of the number of employees that you have, but this is something that, in here, this case, the 6 full-time employees in terms of time frame is made up of all 100 employees in my fictitious company, not just 1 or 2 of them. Certainly the 3% that are using 10 hours a week, they're the biggest culprits, sure. But you got to figure out who are those 3%, who is the 8%, and so on in this graph. The next issue would be harassment and discrimination. The EEOC has their 2011 stats out. They just put out their 2012 report last week, but I haven't had a chance to drill through it, so I just stuck with the 2011 stats that I've had for a little bit of time. And if nothing else, you can see the millions of dollars in damages paid out for different claims, and the number of claims that were initially presented as well. This is real tangible money that is having to be paid by organizations. Just to kind of put it in context, I grabbed their newsroom section of their website, and if you read down most of these, they have how much. You see, Rock Tennessee Services was $500,000, DHL Global was $201,000, Sutter Transfer $30,000, and so on. This is tangible money that is going out the door because of either sexual harassment or discrimination type claims. I actually saw an article the other week where there was a sexual harassment charge or claim put against a company, and the company had to pay some damages, and it involved one employee sexually harassing another employee via social media off hours. So they were using like Facebook and Twitter to harass someone. I mean, it's not even, by the water cooler or, hey, they're good looking, as you're walking down the hall anymore. This is where organizations, if they're aware of what's going on, they're liable for damages potentially just because of one employee harassing another employee, even if it's off hours over social media. It seems ridiculous, but that's where things are going right now. And because those cases have been determined, they now set precedent. And so that becomes kind of interesting as we move forward to figure out how this all plays out. The last one here I have is misconduct. And misconduct could be anything from somebody like back 2 up to employee productivity. They're just not doing their job, right? It could be someone even running a business during your work time. I'll give you an example. I had a buddy of mine that worked at a big tech company on second level enterprise support. It's usually long hours of long cases. They a lot of times have to do research on certain issues because they're far more advanced than basic things. And this is back in the heyday when there were day traders. If you remember, in the .com boom, a lot of people were day trading. And so one of his buddies would be on the phone with a customer and would say, "Would you mind if I put you on hold? I just need to do a little research on this issue." And he'd put them on hold. He didn't have to do any research. He was day trading for the next 15 minutes and would come back and say, "Okay, I found an answer." And he was doing it on company time, doing his day trading. Another example just here that I have is the issue of porn at work. There was a survey that recently just came out about 2 weeks ago, I think, in Australia, where they were looking at the amount of pornography sites that were viewed on a daily basis, and they found out that 60 million people are looking at porn daily, according to this data. And then of that, 67% or 2/3 of visits are made while at work. And so I sit there and I think about that, and I think both you and I would agree. I can't perceive someone, like watching some kind of porn video or something at work, and just letting it play. So I imagine that this might be all kinds of the wide spectrum of porn. It might even just not suitable for work kinds of pictures, all the way to something that might be really hardcore in those stats. Because I can't imagine that 60 million people and 2/3 of visits are all porn at work. And I walk around my office and no one's doing it, but I've never been in a business that I ever saw anyone doing it. So I kind of think it's got to be a mixture of everything there. So there's definitely some reasons to monitor employees for those issues like fraud, for data theft. Even maybe some of the sexual harassment type issues, but more for the first two. There are some problem employee signs you can, of course, look for. And these are all kind of documented and well accepted across business in general. The first one is stress and personality changes. Certainly when we're talking about someone who's stealing from the company or is taking data with them, that kind of thing, there is stress and personality changes. If you're having money problems at home, stress levels are going to be high. And maybe a little more withdrawn, maybe trying to be a little more secretive if they're doing something wrong, that kind of thing. Reluctance to take vacation or delegate responsibility. And that's usually an indicator if someone is, let's say, I used the example earlier of someone writing checks. They're in accounting, let's say, or finance or something, and they're writing checks to a fictitious company that's actually themselves. They obviously won't want to take a vacation. Why? Because someone else will have to write the checks while they're gone. And they may end up having to need to look at a set of checks from last week and notice this company and then stumble across the fact that, hey, that's not a real company and why are we paying? And suddenly that employee gets busted, right? Same reason for not wanting to delegate. So there's those issues. Sudden change of lifestyle. I read a story about a security officer at a London bank. I blogged about it in our blog at contextblog.spectorsoft.com. And she had stole, I think it was 4 million pounds over, it was either 2 or 3 years. And she thought that she was owed it because of all the work she did. Now, if I'm assuming she made, 100,000 pounds a year, 200,000 pounds a year. She was the chief of security for a big bank or whatever, maybe even more. But she decided to steal another 4 million pounds over a couple of years. She'd probably driving a nice car or wearing a nice watch or something, sudden change of lifestyle. There's suddenly this extra influx of money. So it's something to look for. Cozy relationships with the suppliers and vendors is another issue. If you've got people that are responsible for vendor relationships and they're going to be pushing a lot of money out to a vendor or to a supplier, there's a good possibility that supplier wants to show their appreciation, whether appropriately or inappropriately, and hopefully you have some checks and balances in place there, which actually brings me back to this last issue, and they have too much control without audit checks. That's another big problem employee sign, where back to even like the second bullet example where someone is writing checks to a fraudulent company, they don't want audit checks. They don't want someone seeing what they're doing because of the fact that they're doing something that is inappropriate in your business. So those are some common signs there as well. Let's jump into just talking about the SpectorSoft solutions and get to some of the tips and tricks that we've got so that you can get a little better use out of the product you have today. So I've got 3 products listed here. Everyone who's on this call today has the first 2 on the left. You have either Spector Pro, which is a single-use, single computer, watching a single person kind of a product for recording and playing back their activity. You have Spector C&E, which is more for centralized investigation. It's Spector Pro functionality, but put into a platform that allows centralized configuration and deployment of the agents. You can decide what it is you want to collect and what you're going to record. And then centralized review of the activity. So that way, from a legal standpoint, you're actually pulling the data centrally off the machine being recorded, and that way you have a local copy that can't be modified by the user or deleted if they happen to find it or they steal a laptop and take it with them or something. You at least have a record of everything that happened. And then Spector 360 is a product that I don't believe anybody on the call has today, but Spector 360 is our flagship detection and monitoring solution that allows basically company-wide monitoring. And when I say company-wide, I don't necessarily mean everyone has to be monitored, but they could be. But it might be more like you're going to be able to look at 100 people, 50 people, 5,000 people, as opposed to a 1 or a 3 or that kind of thing you might find with Spectre Pro and Spectre C&E. Spectre 360 also aggregates the data together, and I'll show you an example of that a little later on. Where you can start seeing trends of what's going on in your organization and provide some real intelligence to your monitoring. So those are the solutions. We're going to start with the first two. Let's deal with making the most out of Spectre Pro first. I've put bit.ly links, by the way, at the bottom left, which links right to our support pages that deal with these issues. So as I'm talking about this, if it's something you're not aware of, just jot down the bit.ly link. It's case sensitive, of course, and that way you can always go back and relook at this on your own time. So the remote viewing is there for Spectre Pro. If you're monitoring an employee and you're thinking you've got to go to their desktop and hit Control-Alt-Shift-S and then put in the password and watch it on that machine and wait till after hours, you don't. There's a separate kind of install, which you may have forgotten since you did the installation so long ago, but on, let's say, your work computer, you could go ahead and install a viewer only. You see that as the second option there in the screenshot, a viewer only, and it installs just the viewer and the supporting files. And then what happens is, this, by the way, works for Windows and Mac. I'm just happen to be showing the Windows here. And then when you go to view a recording, it'll say browse for the folder, and you'd have to connect over to, in this case, I've got the example of a Windows share. It's a hidden share that's with the $sign there. It can't be seen normally, but since we know what we're looking for, it's visible. And you can connect to the machine and say, I want to see the recording on that machine. And you have the exact same functionality you have, where you can go through the different tabs, look at the top 10 reports, you can see the detailed activity, review the screen snapshots. Everything's the same, you're just not physically on that machine. So that's the first thing you can do to get more out of Spectre Pro. The second one is interpreting chat and IM. We live in a work world right now where we have this sort of Gen Y workforce where they were seemingly born with a tablet in their hand or an iPod or something, right? And as a matter of fact, I posted a cartoon the other day where it was something like, I see you're using the grandpa computer. This was Dilbert from a while back, and Dilbert's like, well, what? I'm using my workstation. What do you mean? He goes, oh, well, we use our cell phones and our tablets. And he goes, well, I use a laptop. And he goes, well, I'll text the 90s and I'll let them know. And just basically you have this workforce that is so used to a different form of communicating than an older workforce. And so one of the features here is interpreting the chat and IM. You can see at the bottom of the chat conversation, this happens to be an example of more of a consumer chat example of, do you have homework for geometry or something like that, but you can go with it anyways. You see the B4N, and if you hover over it, you'd see an interpretation of what that actually means. So if you're wondering what do those things mean, you have the ability to hover over that, and you can interpret that very quickly and understand what it means. The logo's all been plugged in. Again, bit.ly link at the bottom left. The next one is for Spectre C&E and Spectre Pro, and that is the top 10 reports. The top 10 reports are there where they see, we always find that customers using C&E, so this may apply more to C&E folks than Pro, but we always find that when we're talking to C&E customers, they just totally didn't realize that you could look at a top 10 report as opposed to the entire recording. And the beautiful part about the top 10 report is the fact that I've got these 6 different categories. So for example, with program activity, I can see the top 10 programs they were using based on the amount of time they're using it. Or if it was email, I can see the top 10 people that they were emailing. Or if it's keywords, the top 10 keywords, or web searches, and so on. And that's beneficial because it kind of filters out everything and lets me see what you're working on. So if you think, let's say, an employee's leaving, you could go and look up, let's say, resume writing or a resume or something as the website search or the keywords, and you'd know, hey, there's something going on, and that way you wouldn't have to go through and drill through all the information that is presented in the recordings, and just very quickly get to a succinct report that tells you this is where this person's head is. This is who they're chatting with a lot. This is what they're doing in program activity a lot. This is what they're searching for, the websites they're going to a lot. This is who they're emailing a lot. You're honing down and just getting to the root of what's going on. And then there's, again, the 6 types there. You can see them in the screenshot, but also they're listed here: chat, online searches, web visits, email, program, and keywords. The next one that applies to Pro and C&E is the time drill down. And I'm going to jump over to my VM that I have here. And let me just go ahead and log in. This is my Spectre C&E VM that I have. And for the Pro folks on the phone, again, the difference between Spectre CNE and Spectre Pro is you have this console here where you can centrally deploy out the client, and then you also can review multiple machines all at once. It's one of the benefits of using Spectre CNE over Spectre Pro. But let me show you the drill down here. By default, if I was to go in, I'm just going to grab somebody here like R. Rosen. The data here isn't all that important, nor is the user selected, but I was going to pull up their data. And when I look at program activity, by default, you have this one column here, total time. It says the word total. I've added in two other columns by very easily right-clicking and selecting both focus and active time. And those are important. If you've only used total time, let me explain the difference between all three of these and how they're beneficial. Total time is the total amount of time an application was open. So for example, someone comes in the morning at 9 o'clock and they open up, let's say use Salesforce for your customer management. Or you might use ACT or something, or a Microsoft CRM or whatever. So you open up in the morning and the total time for the day says 8 hours and 21 minutes or something, right? That doesn't tell you what they did in it. Were they active? Were they doing anything? It just tells you how long the program was open. Focus time tells you the amount of time that the window was in the foreground. Like right now, this R. Rosen window that I've got open is in the foreground in front of this one behind it, which says Recordings by User Spectre CNE Control Center. So did they have it in the foreground? Was it the one they were actively working on? So right off the bat, if I had 8 hours of total time, but I only had, let's say, 2 hours of focus time, that means they only had it in the foreground 2 hours. It was 6 hours they were not using that program at all. But then it gets even more detailed than that. You have active time. That's the amount of time they're interactively working with that application. They're clicking on things. They're making changes. They're modifying values. They're clicking links, whatever it is, right? And so that becomes valuable because now I can actually figure out how much time were they spending in the application, even though they had focus. So a couple of examples. If I had someone who's a salesperson using Salesforce, and they're actively working, right? They're doing their job. I should see a total time, a focus time, and an active time that are pretty close. Right, I should see something. Certainly, total time would be all 8 hours of the day. Focused and active should be pretty high up there, a couple of hours, 5 hours, something like that. Active would be less than focused because they might have it open while they're making a phone call. And they're not clicking on anything. They're not making any changes, but then they go and they use it afterwards and so on. But another example, if someone was using their web browser to watch like the Final Four or something, basketball games, or they're watching the NHL playoffs or something, whatever it is, right? They're watching some kind of sports game. They might have the total time of their web browser very high. They'd have the focus time very high because, of course, they left it in the foreground so they could watch the video, but the active time would be very low because they're not clicking on anything. So you can see this stuff all kind of adds to the evidence, if you will, to provide some context. So that's a feature set. And again, the way that you enable that, if you don't have it, you just simply hover over the column bars here and right-click, and then you can select them here. You just select focused and active. Let me jump back here to my slides. Again, there's a bit.ly link for this one in case you forget it. The next one is going to be the standalone viewer and splitting out the components. Now, the standalone viewer is done during the install of CNE. This applies just to Spectre CNE. And it's similar to basically seeing the viewer only that you had in Spectre Pro. No difference there. You're basically just installing the viewer components. But I also want to point out the fact that you can break out the components. The data vault is where the data is going to be stored. Remember that, first off, one of the differentiators between Spectre Pro and Spectre CNE is the ability to not have to have the data vault residing on the machine that's being recorded. With CNE, I can centrally locate that data so it pulls off the client. That way I retain and I am in control of the recordings, and the person being recorded has, if they ever catch wind of it, they have no ability to modify that or alter it or whatever the case is. Now, I can actually install the data vault on literally my workstation. CNE was designed from the ground up to be a very simple entry-level centralized monitoring and detection solution, where I can put the data viewer, the vault, all the server components on my workstation, literally like a Windows, Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8 workstation machine, and record other machines in the office. You might split them out. The data viewer, of course, is just the viewer. The data vault is where the data is going to be stored. Maybe you decide you're going to plug that in on a server that has access to some kind of network attached storage or something. Could do that. The Control Center is that application I just had open where you could see where I could click the individual recordings, as well as I could go ahead and define the configuration of what's going to be recorded. And then the primary server, the second one down that I left here for last, is the service that is responsible for both licensing and making sure that SpectorSoft is up to date, and it pulls down the updates from SpectorSoft.com and will push it out to the various other servers that are there. So you have that benefit of splitting this out so that maybe all you want on your workstation really is the viewer, but you'd rather have the data vault up on a server someplace so that you could automatically have it backed up or something. And then, well, since you're at it, let's put the primary server and the control center up there as well so that I can, because I'm never going to change those very often or something like that. At least there's flexibility in the product, helps you get more out of the product itself. Now, a lot of you had indicated you had 25 or less employees. That might mean if I put my consultant hat back on, you may literally have one server in your office. You might have like a Microsoft small business server for all 25 people. And so you want to have absolute control of what's going on. So there's the ability to data archive. So if in my scenario of let's stick the data vault up on a server and let it back up the tape every night doesn't exactly fit what you can do, you can still archive the data. You can still get it backed up to an alternate location. It's kind of a feature set that isn't well documented. Well, I should say it's well documented, but isn't well used. Let me go over here to my VM. And what I can do here is when I click on servers inside C&E and I double click on the data vault server, it's this second set of options down here, third set of options, data archiving. I can enable it and I can put in a path and I can archive if it's over a certain number of days old, and I can specify the frequency of daily, weekly, monthly, and what time and day of the week to do that. And the benefit there is if you don't have a server to do backups, you could at least, for an example, you could take a USB-based drive, like I have like a half terabyte USB drive that I can use, and I could archive to that. At least now I've got a backup of all of the information that SpectorSoft has stored. So that's a real good way of being able to archive that information, have it accessible, and that way you're not going to lose it. So kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to exit the screen, lose my changes. That's fine. So let me kind of show you this solution comparison here so that everyone gets a real good sense of where the products fit. Spectre Pro, made for one machine. It's for Windows and Mac. It basically gives you the ability to record and review on a single PC. Spectre C&E is meant, really it's intended for like 3 to 10. It's for focused investigations. You have a number of machines you want to look at, but you're really doing things on a one-off basis. Supports Windows currently. You do notice that you get the centralized management, meaning I can configure what it is I want to record. I can also centrally review it. I also get what is known as client-side alerting. If you haven't turned that on, or if you're a Spectre Pro customer, just real quickly I'll show that to you. When I define, you don't do this on Pro, but you can do this in C&E and in 360, I can define what is going to be recorded. And then there are configurations for each one of these. If I decide I want to record websites, I can go ahead and I can define what are the web ports and so on. It's a little bit more advanced technically. I can also define for my screen snapshots, if I'm going to capture those, what format I want to capture, from 1-bit monochrome to 32-bit color. It also supports 8 monitors, so that's pretty cool. But then I mentioned client-side alerting, and that's over here in this alert tab. I can do a keyword watch list. And I can type in keywords here. So if someone was to type in the name of the secret project we have, Blackbriar or something, I can automatically be notified via email. That's what this alert notification section is about, right? I can configure that I'll send it out via email. But you see here, it'll check for that keyword in chat and instant messaging, emails, websites, web pages, keystrokes, even files being transferred. And then the beautiful part is that screen snapshots that everyone's used to seeing, by default on C&E is every 30 seconds. I can speed up the snapshots to say do it for every 1 second, every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds for a duration of time. The intent there is if they've typed in the word Blackbriar, which is our super secret project here, right, that I want to see a lot of detail in the screen snapshots. I don't want to miss anything, so I don't want every 30 seconds. I'll miss a lot. So I want to do it really, really frequently for a period of time that would give me some context around what's going on. So again, for your pro folks, and kind of a freebie there for the C&E folks if you haven't used that before. So again, back to the solution comparison, you'll see that Spectre 360 is really designed for 10 plus employees being monitored. Supports Windows and Mac, it's all centralized management and so on, but it includes a couple other features that I do want to show you real quick. You have server-side alerting, which is different from client-side, and I'll show you that in a second here. Dashboard views, you can drill down into the data because you are looking at an enterprise or company-wide set of data. You want to be able to drill down a couple ways. An advanced search that's there. The screenshots can be time-stamped. The delegated access is very cool. The assumption is in a larger organization where you're monitoring lots of people, you might want, let's say, the head of sales to be able to review the activity of those people in the sales team. And somebody in accounting can watch the accounting team and so on. So you can delegate out access. And then there's also turnkey and custom reporting. So let me just really quickly show you a quick demonstration of 360. I've already done for you, shown you a little bit of C&E, but let me jump over here to my 360. Just to show you some similarities, you see here like for recordings, this is in Spectre 360, not C&E anymore. And look, it looks almost identical, right? It is. There's a lot of feature sets there that are the same. But again, we have Mac and Windows clients here. I have the client-side alerting built in, but I also have server-side alerting. And with server-side alerting, the difference here is that it's going to look at the data that is in the database centrally and then set out alerts based on that. So it's not real time, but it is providing a lot more intelligence. So I can do things like, as an example, I can look at, let's say, excessive printing as maybe one of the key indicators that we might have. It's something's going on, something's wrong. In this case, this predefined alert says if the count of events is greater than 5, and you could pick this to be anything you want, of course, and then I have some parentheses to create some Boolean logic here where I'm going to group these next two lines together. The activity contains print or the device type contains printer. Then I want to be notified, and you would be, these are who's being managed. This is who'd be sent an email, and then you can specify when you're going to actually do this. In this case, you might say like after hours printing, so maybe I only watch from 5 p.m. on or something. The benefit of these is you can then define very, very specific types of alerts. To give you an example, I had met with a former CTO of a very large hospital, and they said one of the biggest problems that we have is when people are inside the medical records app and they hit print screen, because that right there is a HIPAA violation. Can you tell me when that happens? Yes, I can. I could basically do if the keystroke is print screen and if the title, a window title, is a certain value, and I'd have to be based on whatever application they're using and what the window titles look like, I could notify you. And then you'd know every time somebody print screens, and you can address it. It could also be anything like if someone types in a certain word on a web page, or someone types in a certain format. You're worried about, let's say, Social Security numbers. You could say if the keystroke format is number dash number dash number, right? 3-2-4 for a Social Security number. You can put that in there. So this is very, very powerful stuff, but it needs the full set of data that it can go back and review as opposed to being real time in order to be able to configure and create these alerts. So there's that. And then just to show you a little bit of difference here with Spectre 360, the first thing is if I go to the User Explorer, this is just like what I just showed you in C&E. I can bring up an individual user's set of events, and I have those same 10 tabs that you're used to already seeing. But Spectre 360 lets you drill down in many, many other ways. And did I hit click? I guess I did. Maybe open it twice. The first thing is with these quick view panels. There's a lot of predefined turnkey ones. You can create your own, and it's a way of gaining visibility into what the employees are doing, both in and of themselves in terms of looking at what an individual is doing, but also you can aggregate the data and look at what's going on over the course of the company. So for example, here where it says websites where users are spending the most time, it looks like Facebook company-wide, for all the people that I recorded, Facebook is the number one issue. And then I can click into that, and what it does is everything here is Facebook related, but then I have the 5 users involved, and I can drill into the user, I can drill down to the date, and so on, and of course I can view the screen snapshots when I'm ready to. So very powerful that way. I can also do it based off of data, and I can just simply go, well, I'm really worried about, let's say, program events, and I click into program events. I should actually do it this way. And then I have all the program events and all the users that ran programs. And then I can again drill into the user, drill into the day, go down to the application and view the screen snapshot. We're trying to provide you intelligent ways to navigate down so that you can solve the questions, find the answer to the questions that you're trying to find. The search is real powerful. This is where I have the ability to look for a specific term company-wide. So you don't have that in C&E or Pro, because you're looking at individual users. You just, in C&E, you have multiple individual users, but it's still individual views. This looks across all the data and says, show me anybody that put this in. Because I'm not sure. I know that I think somebody is stealing company records. Maybe you think, let's say, there's a social security number that got out. You could type it in here and you can see exactly who typed it in, company-wide. That's really powerful stuff. So kind of keep that in mind. Now, basically, once I do the search, it would come back and show me. In this case, I'm looking for the name Walton because I knew that it was a program window caption being used for a particular medical record. And then for any one of these, I can, of course, right-click and go to the snapshots, and I can see the snapshot here coming up. It'll take a second, and then this guy's about to open up. I believe it's the Walton account. Maybe I've got the timing wrong on the screen snapshots, but you guys get the point, anyways. And then, of course, there is full reporting. There's a couple of turnkey reports. I have them in different report folders so that I can look at different reporting here. And this is just the details. So if I just run a report here real quick, you can see it's the details based off of what criteria is there for time ranges, for what users, for what search engines, and so on. And you're just basically building reporting out as well, so you have some detail and what's the word I'm looking for? Proof of what's going on. So that's just really quickly, that's kind of 360 in a nutshell. I want you to be able to see that. So again, the difference here between these three products: Spector Pro for a single instance, C&E 3 to 10, a little bit more centralization, but still individual user monitoring. Spector 3 is more really about the detection of the threats that are inside your organization, whether it's fraud, data theft, employee productivity, harassment, misconduct, sexual harassment, discrimination, whatever it is. All that can be seen, and you aggregate the data to get more intelligence company-wide of what's going on. We do have a couple of attendee specials. If you find that some of the more advanced solutions are of interest, we do have some migration specials going on. You see the U.S. number up there. You can give us a call. You can also get the toll-free number off the website. I just forgot to type it in, so I apologize. But we do have a bunch of different migration specials. You can call and speak to a specialist. I'm not in sales, so I don't know the pricing. But there are ones if you want to go from the Pro that you have to C&E to 360, or from C&E to 360. We do have some stuff going on through the end of the year. And just make sure you mention that you were on the webinar and you heard me say that. You say, Nick told me there was a sales special. You can also email sales@SpectorSoft.com as well. For those of you interested in Spector 360, there's a 15-day evaluation. You can actually take a look at the product and see it in action, that kind of thing as well. So that's kind of good. So just kind of in summary, I always like to say if you have employees, you have problems. And it sounds harsh, but we all know it's true. You're already doing this today. There's a reason why you have Pro. There's a reason why you have C&E. It's because your employees, there's some issues. There's always something that's going to be wrong. And so we're helping you meet the need of any size organization, and you see those different issues there at the bottom. We're helping you with all of them, letting you know by giving you visibility into what the employee's doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some questions. There is a questions portion of the control panel. And I'm going to go ahead and try and answer as many questions as I can. And depending on the number of questions, because I've got, I think, about 15 minutes left, I'm going to answer a couple questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and give away the iPad mini. And then we'll answer as many questions as we have until the top of the hour. So I've got a couple that'll start things here. And Debbie asks, and this is actually a common question. Debbie says, "Can we get a copy of the slides?" Yes, both this recording. I'm recording this webinar. Both recording the webinar and the slides will be made available after the webinar, probably like tomorrow. It might be Monday because today is Thursday, but they'll be available on our events page, and we'll be sending out an email anyways to let you know that if you want to get a copy of it. So that's fine. So Douglas asks. When the data vault is centralized, what happens to monitoring a laptop that's removed from the network? That's a perfect example. So in all cases, the agent that runs I'm assuming we're talking about C&E and 360, of course, because obviously you wouldn't be centralizing anything with Pro. When the client is disconnected from the server, it runs like it would normally when it's local. It would just continue to run and save everything locally, and then once it can finally reconnect, it will do so and upload the collected data. So that isn't an issue, especially if you have like laptops, users that aren't connected very often, whatever the case is, they'll be able to go off, do their thing, we'll collect it, and then you're going to get the data back. Obviously, in the case of Spectre 360 with the server-side alerts, you're not going to get a server-side alert until the data gets uploaded, and then it can be searched, and then an alert can be generated. Tim asks, are you doing anything to help stay away from antivirus solutions incorrectly identifying this as malware? Actually, Tim, that's a great question. So in version 7.4, the current version of Spectre 360, and I'm not sure if it's already been out in C&E. I believe that it's already been rectified in C&E, but one of the things that we've done, because we're not whitelisted with every antivirus vendor, which we are actively working on, we've got a couple left that we aren't, but there's a large number of them that we are, we have put all of the executables into one folder. So at least what you're able to do then is in your antivirus make a single exclusion. Instead of having to say that application wherever it is and that one over there and that one over there and all these different locations, it's one folder and anything in there gets excluded. So at least trying to simplify it for you, and hopefully that would help. So that's what the current version. So if you're not using a current version, I would encourage you to upgrade. I know 367.4 is definitely that has it. I think that C&E's had it. I don't know. Again, I'm not in sales, nor am I in tech support. I'm actually in marketing. So there's some things that I just end up not being up to speed on. So I apologize if you don't get an answer on that. If that didn't answer your question, send an email to sales@SpectorSoft.com. You can even tell them to forward it to Nick. That's me, guy did the webinar, and I'll be happy to make sure that I get you an answer. So Amy says, what about screen snapshots for desk computers with 2 monitors? The agent supports up to 8 monitors, so there's the ability to already get those by default with Spectre 360. I don't believe C&E does 8 monitors. I believe it's just 360, but I'm not sure. So, Amy, I'm going to make a note to make sure that I get you an answer just in case you are talking about C&E, but you can obviously just pipe in here and say which product you're talking about. I'd be happy to have sort of a dialogue going back and forth. But C&E supports up to 8 monitors, all in the same recording. You see all the screenshots. Oh, you have Pro. Okay. And Pro's one machine, one single monitor. That's what it's designed for. So if you're really looking at upgrading, I would look at C&E or 360. But again, I'm going to make a note anyways and get back to you an answer so that at least you know if you had to go to something else, whether you could go to C&E or you'd have to go to 360 kind of thing, because I'd like you to know that. So let me find that out. Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So Brad asked, does SpectorSoft monitor or have access to company data? So we're monitoring the user activity, right? We're not monitoring the data. We're not monitoring the mediums. We're trying to monitor what the users do with it. So I guess what I'm lacking a little bit, Brad, maybe you could put in the question thing here, and I'll try and scroll down and we can answer this question pretty soon. What's the context of where the concern is? Because we don't have actually access to anything. We're simply kind of like a video camera, right, sitting behind an employee and watching them from the moment they sit down to the moment they get up. But if you're really worried about what data they access or something like that, that would be helpful. So give me a little context of where your question is, and I'll definitely come back and answer it. Randy says, our client that's requesting monitoring has the same usernames on all 5 machines. Can this be sorted by machine name or instead by username? Typically, it's by username. So it's very odd. I'm assuming, Randy, that the username is there because they're using like a generic account. Yeah, that usually presents some problems. We have even some issues with customers where they're monitoring, like odd example, but Spectre 360 is being used in some cases by law enforcement to watch parolees. And they put an agent on the desktop and they have to be connected back as part of some court order. And they're wondering even who, machine name LXQ599Z is. They don't know. And it's one of the same issues. So it's going to be by username by default. So I would think that the answer is going to have to revolve around you having that client have at least some differentiator between those accounts. So you can tell which user it is if that is the case, because really that's what our intent is, right? To monitor the user, not so much the machine. Meaning we're trying to know what John is doing, not what's going on John's machine, because John might log in, and then Susie might log in, and then Sally might log in, all on that same machine. We're trying to differentiate which user is doing what. So I would suggest going down that path. Okay, Brad comes back to his question about the data. He says, do you see our passwords and proprietary data? First thing to note, we, SpectorSoft, we don't see anything. Once you install it, it's on your system. It has nothing to do with SpectorSoft, right? We don't. Anyone who is managing Spectre 360 or Spectre Scene or Spectre Pro will see anything that the user sees or anything the user types in, because there is a key logging functionality built in, and of course the screen snapshot. So if you're worried about does SpectorSoft have access to your information, absolutely not. None whatsoever. We don't see that. We're giving you a piece of software that runs locally and doesn't report anything back to us whatsoever. So that's just you have visibility into your data. We do not. So hopefully that answers your question there. Bradley asks, good question. What are the requirements to notify employees about monitoring? So that depends, of course, on local and federal law. I'm assuming that everybody here is in the United States. To my knowledge, and I'm not a lawyer, right? To my knowledge, there are no employee privacy laws that exist, but there are two schools of thought. One is we usually recommend at a minimum put out an internet or computer acceptable use policy, and you note in there you may be monitored. Because while there's no right to privacy, and I'm speaking of that from a legal standpoint, if someone has a right to privacy, that means that someone else has a legal duty to uphold that privacy, right? Just like we have freedom of speech, the United States government has a duty to uphold, my right and your right to freedom of speech. There's a balance there. Anytime there's a right, there's a duty. And so in this case, there is no duty for any employer to maintain privacy, but there's a reasonable expectation of privacy because they don't know that they're being recorded. So we typically tell people you should probably at least put in there you may be recorded. In some cases, you might want to flat out say you're going to be recorded. You are being monitored. It's another deterrent there. But typically we find customers that have said, well, we'll just go ahead and tell people they're being monitored and not monitor. People eventually figure out they're not being monitored or not being recorded. So you got to kind of back it up with our product as well. Hopefully that answers your question. Tim says, does Cine install and work with antivirus software like Kaspersky? I actually believe, Tim, but don't quote me because, again, I'm not in tech support, but I believe that Kaspersky is one of the companies that have whitelisted us. We have a bunch of them. I think we have like Microsoft left and Symantec, I think, are the only two left that haven't. So I believe that they're one of the ones that have already whitelisted us. But again, even if that's not the case, there'll be a single folder that gets installed. There's some documentation we provide, so you could go into your Kaspersky beforehand and make the exception saying anything in that folder over there, when it gets deployed to the clients, ignore that, it's fine. So we try and make that easy. Michael asks, where's the data stored on 360? Great question. It's stored in an SQL server, Microsoft SQL Server database, which could be on the same box as a Spectre 360 box, or it could be on another server that's running SQL. Samir, I hope I said your name right, S-E-M-I-R. If I didn't, I apologize. Says, can this program be deployed from a central server to multiple machines, or does each one have to be installed manually? I'm not sure which product you're talking about, so I'm going to answer for all three. For Spectre Pro, you need to be on the machine doing the install because it's meant to be a single machine type of product. Spectre Scene and Spectre 360 both install the agents behind the scenes in stealth. Where you just need to have the credentials of the machine or a local admin account, that kind of thing, and will install. You don't need to have multiple machines or go to those machines. You can just deploy it centrally. So there's that. And if I didn't answer your question, please, by all means, answer a couple things there. And give me another question. I'll be happy to answer them. Let me give away the iPad, because I know there's some people who aren't here for all the questions. I'm a realist, right? I know that some of you are and some of you aren't. So I'm going to give away the iPad mini real quick, but I'm going to continue to answer these questions. I'll probably even go over 3 o'clock if you want. As long as people are staying in here, I'll be happy to keep answering questions because I like doing that. So let me go ahead and announce the iPad mini winner. And I have the iPad winner as being Ken Larson. It looks like fbc-telly.com. So you're the iPad mini winner. you can just sit tight. Somebody from my marketing team will be reaching out to you, and we'll get you your iPad Mini just in time for the holidays. That sounds so cheesy. I know. Sorry, I couldn't pass it up. I had to say that. But anyway, so the rest of you, you're all still winners or whatever. But I'm sorry you didn't win, but we're going to keep answering questions nonetheless. So let's keep going. But Ken, congratulations. Ashley asks, can you be alerted if an employee deletes web history, IM, or chat history, etc.? I would think I'm trying to think of a way to do that. It doesn't work as simply as that. I would, if I was putting my consultant hat on, I would actually go and look at, in the particular web browser you had, what did the window title look like when they did that? Like, for example, let's say there's a title window that comes up as part of the process that says confirm deleting browser history, yes or no, right? I'm assuming that that's probably there in IE, something like that. You could be alerted if that ever comes up, right? You could say, anytime I see that, I want an alert. So it comes down to actually figuring out the very specific, what is it that the employee is doing, what are they interacting with, and then I want to be notified when they see that, they do that, they type that. That's how detailed. I don't think it's really technical as much as just detailed it needs to be, because you have to be very specific on what you want to see in order to make sure you're not getting a lot of false positives. Right? If you just put browsing history, anytime browsing history comes up, tell me. Well, I could be looking at my browsing history, and that doesn't help. You'd want to know if they're deleting it, so I would actually suggest, if I was putting my consultant hat on, I'd figure out what constitutes deleting browser history and looking at the very specific interaction the user has with the operating system or the application, and then figuring out a way to go, if they'd see that window, I know they're deleting it. And then that kind of thing. So the short answer is yes, but you'd have to do a little bit of work. Patrick asks, what's the traffic throughput of the communications between the client agent and the servers, and the differences between the products? Well, certainly with Pro, it's all local, so nothing except for when you're replaying, and I think that is really dependent on what you're pulling back. But in the case of, let's say, 360, you figure 7 to 10 megs a day at screenshots for every 30 seconds. If you go all the way down to 1-bit monochrome, it lowers it by about 3 megs a day per user. So it's not a lot of information, but the short answer to what's the traffic throughput for the communications, the short answer is it depends. It's like the universal IT answer, right? Because the reason it depends on how frequently you want to pull screen snapshots, how much data are you pulling. Are you pulling monochrome all the way up to 32-bit color? Are you doing multiple monitors? There's a lot of what ifs and could be's in there that come into play. So, but the general rule of thumb, figure 7 to 10 megs a day with 4-bit monochrome, or is it 4-bit color? Sorry. And that kind of thing. So that hopefully helps answer your question. If it doesn't, by all means, give me another question. I'll be happy to answer it. Adnan says, can users with admin rights over the machine uninstall or see the agent in add remove programs? If I remember correctly, it isn't showing up in add remove programs. They would be able to see, obviously, by running like Task Manager, they can see some weird process running. They could see the services running. We try and, for the purposes of maintaining your desire for it to run in stealth, we try and obfuscate as much as we can so we don't make it all that obvious that this is SpectorSoft Spectre 360's agent and so on. We name it something else. But in theory, it is possible for them to be able to see it, so you would want to take some precautions to try and remove it as much as possible. But if you're talking about, as an example, let's say an executive in the company that has admin rights so they can install some software on their own or whatever, and they're not that technical, I wouldn't be as worried. So, but that's a question. It's a great question, and I think I would probably direct that tech support, or not tech support, excuse me, the SEs, and talk to those guys a little bit more. They've done a tremendous amount of installation experience with customers, more than I even have, and just seeing what they've done to work around it. Brian says, can you block websites visited such as Facebook with CNE? And the answer is you certainly can. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go back over here and just show you real quickly. Go back over to my CNE instance because you asked about CNE. You can do the same thing on Spectre 360. I think I just typed it. Oh, I typed it in right. Cool. It's not designed to be a web filtering product, right? It's not the primary function. But I do have this block functionality here, and I can block websites, and I can add in a website here and put the name of it and so on. It can be used to do that. So if you want to block Facebook, you can do it. One thing to keep in mind is that you're obviously going to let them know there's something installed that blocks them. That's one of the reasons why we try and encourage customers, instead of blocking Facebook or whatever website you don't want, having a solution in place that lets you see what's going on and try to correct the action after the fact. And that seems a little counterintuitive, but here's why. If I block Facebook.com, and that represents any website you want to block, right? I can go to some anonymous proxy, and I can go on Facebook that way. And the real problem there is twofold. One, they're still going to Facebook even though you didn't want them to, right? And two, they're going through some anonymous proxy, which literally could just be a hacker site that has an anonymous proxy, but they also say in order to run, you have to download this JavaScript or whatever. And now there's some hacker code in on your client machine that is now doing key logging so that they can then hack into your system. That's bad. So I'm not a huge proponent for filtering. I'm more of a proponent for monitor what's going on in your organization and then take corrective, managerial action by bringing the employee in, going, okay, you're on Facebook 6 hours a day. It stops today or you're fired. It's harsh, but it's necessary. And that also saves your company from being exposed to the example that I gave, which, by the way, if you go back and read like the data breach investigations report from Verizon, that is a lot of the ways that hackers get in. Is they will actually use employees and will use social tactics to get them to click on something. Like they'll have them go to an alternate browsing site or search site, or they'll give them some result, whatever the case is, in order to get something installed as malware, and then start keylogging, and then get user accounts and all that, so they can start hacking into systems. Very real example. So keep that in mind. Scott says, thanks to the webinar. Looking forward to seeing the slides. You are quite welcome, and they will be sent out notification there. Rod says, is there a way to recover the data from the Pro version when it runs over the days in the perimeter? Oh, you mean the certain number of days that are captured. So in that case, can you change that number of days? First, the short answer is no, Rod, you can't. It only collects a certain number of days, and then it overwrites. But I want to say there's a way to extend the number of days in Pro, if I remember correctly. I just don't remember where it is in Pro. I would tell you to send an email over to tech support or give them a call. Email's probably faster. You have to wait on the phone, and just ask, is there a way? I don't know offhand, but I'm pretty sure with Pro that you can do that. And certainly then in C&E here, if I go over to my data vault, I do have the storage here. If I put it to 0, it'll save it indefinitely. If I put a certain number of days, I can specify the number of days. So keep that in mind. 0 is a great way to make it indefinite, so then you'll never run over. Stefano says, can I install C&E on a peer-to-peer network, and will it slow down the network? So two-part question. Yes, it can be installed on a peer-to-peer network, but you're going to need the credentials to install it. You're going to need like a local admin ID and password when you connect to that machine. So you can do it that way. This is meant to be more of a peer-to-peer type solution. And will it slow down the network? That really depends on how fast your network is, but the reality is with only 7 to 10 megs of data a day, no. It's not going to be noticeable enough. It shouldn't be, but I don't know your network, so I can't say definitively, but for the most part, the educated guess is no, it's nowhere near enough data to have any kind of impact. So John says, I know I can block sites like Facebook. Can you block something like uploading or copying a particular file name or type? So the short answer to that, John, is no, because the product is designed really obviously to be more monitoring than it is like, let's call it a DLP, data loss prevention solution, where I could block certain things from happening. So it's not meant to do that. I can notify you when things are happening, like a particular file name is being copied up and so on, but I can't block it. No, that doesn't happen here. Let's see. Joe says, what ports does Spectre use in the network so I can detect and find unauthorized person monitoring someone? Everything's going over SSL. So it's port 80, port 443, I believe is all it is. You can see these ports that are up here. This is for C&E internally to talk to itself. But like Spectre 360, everything is across HTTP. So it's just port 80. So very, very simply that way. A couple more questions. Let's see. Bradley says, do updates antivirus software cause SpectorSoft to be flagged as suspicious to the end user? Shouldn't be if you've got the exceptions, because we keep the same file names in the same folder and so on, so you shouldn't have that issue even with an update. John says, if an application is open on a second monitor, is it considered to be in the background? Remember, even with Windows, even if I have two windows, only one is technically in the foreground. So the answer to that is yes. If by your question you said, if an application is open on the second monitor, is it considered to be in the background? That's only if the one on the primary monitor is selected. So it's whichever one technically is the one you've clicked on. Think of how you've got the blue title bar, but if you put it in the background, just like so, it's now gray. Only one application, regardless of monitors, in the foreground. So yes. Ashley says, does Pro still track what occurs in the second monitor even if you can't get screenshots? Again, I'm going to say double check with tech support, or if you want to get a faster answer, just send something to sales and tell them to forward it to Nick. I'll find an answer and get it to you. I don't believe Pro does the second monitor, but I want to defer to them to double check. But under the assumption that it doesn't track what's on there, everything else is being done at an operating system level, regardless of the monitor. So the fact that the application is open is an operating system issue. Where the user sees it, that's a monitor issue. So the short answer is yes, it's going to track everything they do, what applications were open, how long they were in focus, everything. It's just a question of whether or not it's going to support multiple monitors like that. And again, I don't know. Teresa asks, does CNE monitor up to 4 monitors? We need to know this answer also. I don't know. Again, I know that 360 is up to 8. So Teresa, I'm going to get you an answer. And I actually mean that, by the way, when I tell you I'm going to do that. I'm not blowing you guys off. I'll actually get an answer. I'll pull these questions down, and we'll make sure that someone on the SE team reaches out to each one of you and answers these questions. They may even answer a question I've already answered, because we send them all out to make sure they all get answered. So think of that. Think of that for me real quick. And then I already answered this one. Frixo says, we have Pro. Are you doing anything to improve the web and email recording? Also, Facebook chat are not recorded on chat IM for some reason. So, two-part question. Let me answer the second part first. The Facebook chat is actually in a web page, so it isn't yet considered chat as opposed to being like a separate chat application, something like that. That might be part of it. The web email recording a lot of times has to do with the browser that's being used, just like any web recording, because we have to work with the application, and it becomes sort of a limitation of the application and not so much of Pro or CNE, or 360. And what I mean by that is, if you're using, I'm going to make this up as I go along. If you're using, let's say, Chrome or something, one of the browsers that are out there, and you want to pull data out of that browser, it's all dependent on how much we can actually pull from the application. If the application works in its own proprietary way, sometimes it's very difficult for us to extract information out from that application. You always will get screen snapshots. Don't forget that. That always works, because that's working regardless of what app. But certainly trying to make improvements on the product. So if there are specific issues that you're having, I would also encourage you to talk to tech support. We just updated Pro 3 weeks ago. There's a new version that's out. So we got our UI refresh and some bug fixes and that kind of thing. So maybe that might fix your problem as well. Let's see. Rod, I think I answered your question, even you came back and gave me an example. If I didn't answer your question, then ping me again on this question bit here. So Dan asks an awesome question. I asked this the first time I saw the product. It says, any plans to incorporate cameras and microphones into recordings? That's a killer question, right? Because you get a laptop with a built-in camera. Why not prove the user was the person sitting there, right? So we've talked about that, and it's all on the roadmap. And I mean that just as I don't know if we're going to get to it. I'm giving the candid answer. I think that'd be killer, because that'd be a lot very cool. Just to, right now the product stands up in a court of law. You know damn well it would stand up in a court of law if you go, no, look, see, they're sitting at the keyboard. Watch them typing. See them moving the mouse. Yeah, that was them. That would be awesome. So I love that. Teresa asked, does it monitor remote desktop sessions? So there's two parts to that question, because there's two scenarios. One is, am I recording? Can I see into the remote desktop? Like, let me give you an example. You can see on my screen, I've got this Windows machine here, right? And I can go in, and you can see me clicking the Start menu, and I'm working on this machine. Let's say that this is the machine being recorded. If I was to go run Microsoft's terminal services connection and remotely connect to some other desktop, I'm the guest OS, going into this host OS here, and I would want to see it. If I'm recording this, I could see that screen. If I was to hit, some server name, server 5 or whatever, and hit connect, and it would work, I would see the resultant screen on my screen snapshots, and I would see the key logging working, but I wouldn't be able to tell and differentiate any of the things, like it wouldn't break out IM and chat from email from whatever inside the remote desktop, because it's just one application from the standpoint of the agent running on this machine right here, right? Okay, so then the other example is if I wanted to record everything that was inside the result of me hitting connect here, which of course I don't have a machine to connect to show you, but if I did, if I had an agent on that machine, so if I was connecting here, to a workstation 5, right, and I hit connect and I started connecting, and on workstation 5 I had an agent running, then I would see what Sally did both on the workstation that is outside of that box, this one out here again with this start menu, as one set of data, and I would also see what Sally did on workstation 5 as another set of data. But again, if I look at what did Sally do today, I'll see it all together anyways. I'll just have to note that they were on which machine. So hopefully that answers your question, but there's two different versions of that. Randy says, can you password protect the CNE dashboard? I don't know. I've never been asked that question. So that's one of those ones I'm going to defer. I'm going to get you an answer back. I would want to say yes, because obviously it'd be stupid for someone just to be able to install the CNE dashboard and then gain access to everything. And the data is all encrypted. So my educated guess is yes, but I don't know. I never thought about that, Randy. It never crossed my mind. So I appreciate the patience, but I'll definitely get you an answer back. eBlaster mobile functionality on an iPhone. Great question. How about any functionality on an iPhone? The problem there is that it's a closed operating system. There are manufacturers out there today that have made products like ours that work on an iPhone. However, you have to jailbreak the phone in order to get them to work. I don't know any business on the planet that is willing to go through the hassle of jailbreaking the phone and then using an alternate to iTunes and so on in order to get applications loaded and that kind of thing, just so that they can record what employees are doing. If you're unfamiliar with eBlaster Mobile that Brad's talking about, we have the ability to record and send digests of information via email for Android and BlackBerry devices, but not for the iPhone. So that's the reason why, Brad, it's a OS limitation there. All right, so Douglas said when installing CNA on a system with Viper managed antivirus, the product was not whitelisted. Yep, Viper's one of the ones that we aren't on. I forgot about them. They're owned by GFI now, if I remember correctly, and prevented from loading at least in the stealth install method. I would try again, taking a look and make sure you have the latest version of CNE, because I believe they've done the same thing as they have with 360 by putting it in one folder. If they haven't, then yeah, it would be a little bit of a headache. But talk to tech support about that. Samir, I did say your name right. Cool. Debbie asks, what version of SQL is used for 360 and is the license included with 360 license? We support multiple versions of Spectre 3, or multiple versions of SQL. If you don't have a license, we don't include one. And of course, the full-blown Microsoft SQL server license costs money. If you don't want to purchase it, you can use the SQL Express. It's free from Microsoft. There's a space limitation on it. I forget how many gigs it is. If there's a techie on here, you'll pipe in and you'll tell me what it is. But there's a limitation in space, but it's fully functional. So you don't have to worry about, do I have to go spend $700 on an SQL Server license? All right, so Ken says, thank you more or less. You're welcome. Let's see. John says if they run a popular malware detector like Spybot Search and Destroy, will Spectre be detected? I don't know about Spybot Search and Destroy, but part of the issue here about trying to keep users from detecting the software, because obviously everyone's got this kind of painting the same picture here. We want to run it in stealth because we want to see the natural activity of what the employees are doing, and that way we know what behaviors we need to correct. And so one of the things I would suggest, you take away admin rights. If you take away admin rights in a Windows environment, they shouldn't be installing anything. They can't. And that will help you keep people from detecting the software. That's the first step I would tell you. Like I said, I used to be a consultant years ago, and built environments as big as literally like 10,000 seats all the way down to 10 seats. And that's one of the things you got to do first. You got to make sure that you restrict their ability to screw up the environment, and in this case, to be able to find it. So I don't believe that Spybot has been updated. I don't know off the top of my head. But Adnan says, where can we find the Kaspersky whitelisting document? If you mean how to whitelist it on Kaspersky, and if you do, would you just respond with a quick yes in the question box, Adnan, and then I'll have to find it for you. It'll be somewhere on our help files, but I can make sure we get you one. Let's see. John says, very informative, well done, and I'm very knowledgeable. Refreshing, thank you. You're quite welcome. I'm glad to do this. I like this stuff. This is good stuff. Tim says, we use Spectre now on a machine with 2 monitors. It records them as one big monitor. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, Tim answered my question. So Tim's got Spectre Pro. See, I love this. We're a big community here. This is good stuff. He's got Spectre Pro. It is running 2 monitors, and it records them as one big monitor. So that's perfect. That'll answer some of the other people's questions that were worried about it. I wasn't aware whether it did or didn't. So you're getting the 2 monitors on there. It may actually go all the way up to the 8 monitors, the same as 360, because it's supposed to be the same agent, just not sure. Answered that one already. Teresa, you're welcome. Brad says, please include me your response on password protecting the scene control center. I'll do that, Brad. No problem. And then Bryce, you asked about entered the webinar late to get the session sent to me. We'll have both. If you look on our SpectorSoft website under I think it's events on our website, there's webinars, and probably by tomorrow, maybe as late as Monday, we'll have both the slides and the recording of this webinar posted there. So you'll be able to see it. We'll also be sending out an email letting you know that it's been posted, so you'll be able to watch this entire thing. I'll make sure that all the questions are still in the recording and everything. So it looks like that's the end of it almost. You're welcome, Debbie, and you're welcome, Bryce. Okay, so I think we're done. It's 3:15. I appreciate you guys staying. It looks like there's still 35 of you on. We started with around 65 or so. I appreciate your attention. Hopefully it was informative. I think that it was. And you learned a little bit more about your own product that you have today. Learn about some of the other products. Remember, we've got some specials going on. The sales guys always want me to pitch that to you. And I hope that you take advantage of everything you can with our products. We're obviously here to help your business stay productive and stay profitable. That would be helpful, yeah. And so thanks for your attention. If you have any other questions, be sure to send them to sales@spectorsoft.com, and we'll make sure that we get those. If you want to get them to me, just say, hey, would you forward this over to Nick, the guy who did the webinar? They know who it is, and I'll be happy to take care of those for you. Thanks a lot for your attendance today, and have a great day.